Welcome to episode 154 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. So let's get started with my first topic, and it's earnings time, and both AT&T and Verizon have reported their 2Q earnings. So at a very high level, AT&T posted about $30 billion in revenue. Also reported 14 straight quarters of 200,000 plus AT&T fiber net adds and 12 straight quarters with 300,000 plus postpaid phone net adds. And they're reporting that it's their best 2Q mobility operating income ever. They also took the opportunity to talk about their demonstration with AST Space Mobile. And we've talked about that on numerous podcasts as well. So overall, fairly decent performance from AT&T. Verizon, on the other hand, a work in progress. So they've been struggling in particular with postpaid phone net adds. And so last quarter, they were negative. So this quarter, they were positive to the tune of just 8,000. But what's interesting as I dug into that represented 144,000 from its business group, but 136,000 net loss from its consumer group. So Verizon still has some room to move. Both stocks were affected by that Wall Street Journal article on lead-clad telecom cabling, which I did post some of my insights after speaking with US Telecom. That's an industry consortium, as well as AT&T leadership. Their stocks have bounced back since then, and there have been some interesting developments on that Wall Street Journal article, in particular, an environmental group that apparently funded their quote-unquote research, and so a story broke yesterday. I did share some insights on Twitter there. I don't want to make the earnings recap, about that, but all in all, I'm not surprised, with either operator. What about you?
Well, in the time that we chose our topics, T-Mobile also announced their earnings.
Late breaking. Why don't you cover that?
I might as well add that in so we kind of bundle it all together nicely. I'll just add that T-Mobile beat on earnings per share by 16 cents per share, reporting that they got 186 while they were expected to get 171, but they missed their revenue, which was almost a 200 million short of expectations. So they posted 19.2 billion when their expectation was 19.34. The stock dipped ever so slightly, and then came back and then went back down and is now clawing its way back up. So it's only a difference of about 1%. So not really hugely impacted by the stock, but they did change their guidance upward. So it's kind of like a mixed bag where they missed their revenue, they beat on earnings, and they're guiding up. So I think investors might not know what to do, but I was pre-briefed on T-Mobile's earnings, and the interesting thing is they're kind of talking about how they're once again leading in growth in customers and profitability, and that they raised their guidance again for this year, and that they are leading in churn and delivering the highest Q2 postpaid phone net adds in 8 years. So their postpaid net account additions was 300,000, and their postpaid net customer additions of 1.6 million was the best in the industry and raised their guidance. And then they had a phone net customer addition of 760,000, and their churn was 0.77%.
Wow.
They also added an additional 500,000 homes high-speed internet customers. So they're just moving on. Obviously there's some operational things that are affecting how their revenue and profitability is, but they're obviously operationally they're very sound because they're beating expectations on profit. So this might just be that maybe they didn't get as many net home ads as they were expecting, or whatever it is. But T-Mobile continues to move down the path of growth and profitability. And I know that AT&T and Verizon are trying to get to that point, but it seems like maybe AT&T is a little bit more further along.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you mentioned, so they added what, 500,000 FWA subscribers. So that's got to push their overall number close to 4 million, right?
I forget what it was. I just looked at the number. That might be true. I have to go back and look again because it's
I
tough
thought it
to
was sitting
remember.
at like 3.2 or 3.3 million. So if that's the case, could be close to 4. So I mean, clearly, they're executing well against their FWA business, and I expect once Verizon gets its C-band built out, they'll have a much more competitive product, and I expect I'm actually going to be pre-briefed by AT&T executive management next week on what they're doing around fixed wireless access. So I don't know how much of that I can share publicly after that conversation with Jen Robinson, but it'll be interesting to sort of glean some knowledge because, FWA has been something that AT&T has kind of held in their back pocket for their business customers, and they really haven't been aggressive with a consumer offering. But it would make sense as sort of a copper catch to move people off of legacy. But
I just had one more thing to add is that
yeah.
Verizon is going to be raising their fixed wireless prices by $10 a month. So
Oh, that's new news. Yeah.
that's not something that we didn't necessarily include as a topic, but it's something that I think our listeners should know about is that they're going
Yeah.
to raise from $25 a month to $35 a month, which is not to be surprising because $25 a month, I can't see them making money on that
No,
because T-Mobile I think is charging more like 50.
they
Um,
are.
so I think Verizon will eventually come up to 50 over time.
Yeah, I think once they improve the performance Verizon does, then yeah, they can sort of meet competition there and raise it. So I think it's just been a market penetration strategy for Verizon to this point. But hey, that's a great segue to your first topic, and you want to talk about T-Mobile lighting up 4x carrier aggregation.
Yeah, so I have been doing a lot of digging, trying to get answers out of companies on what they're doing to compete with this.
Mhm.
And there really isn't any competition, basically. T-Mobile is aggregating two of their 2.5 gigahertz bands with a 1900 megahertz and 600 megahertz. So those 4 carrier aggregation, I'm showing 5 fingers, but 4 carrier aggregation. And I don't think they're going to stop, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because they've got that additional band of C-band that they've got in their back pocket, and they also have some 3.45 gigahertz as well. So
Mhm.
I think they're going to have quite ample spectrum, and I don't know how many carriers they're going to aggregate, but I have a feeling that they're going to start aggregating carriers based on the topology and network strength of your area and where the spectrum is most needed or how it's deployed. But 4K
Yeah.
aggregation is huge. They're claiming up to 3.33 gigabits per second
Yeah.
without millimeter wave. And for Verizon, as good as I've seen it, is at 4 gigs, and that's basically just millimeter wave. So
Right.
it's incredible what they're able to achieve with this, and I don't think they're done. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this evolves over time. But
Mhm.
T-Mobile has the best coverage; they have the best speeds, and this is just going to keep keep continuing them down this path.
Yeah, clearly T-Mobile is taking full advantage of its very broad spectrum footprint, and aggregating, sort of the lower band spectrum improves propagation as well. But I mean, that is some phenomenal performance when you kind of consider that this is low and mid band. There's no millimeter wave there, right?
No,
Yeah, it's crazy, but good. Well, we'll keep our eyes open and continue to see what T-Mobile does. I mean, from my perspective, they're really sort of fine tuning what they've done with their standalone deployment, and I think as their press release stated, putting the pedal to the metal. So, but let's move to my second topic this week, and I know you want to weigh in on this as well. But Intel and Ericsson announced a partnership that's going to involve a number of different things, but in particular 5G SoCs. There wasn't a lot of detail. Both you and I did ask Intel in particular for more color on this, and there isn't a lot available. But Basically, the press release states that the two are going to team up to drive innovation and disruption with new 5G systems on a chip. And so what's interesting is that I have spoken with EdgeQ, and they hope to do the same with their SoC that integrates RISC and ARM to provide a base station on a chip, both 4G and 5G functionality. Now, they're a startup. They're a well-established startup. They've been around for a few years now. I think it's 5. And I did publish a Forbes article. If you go hit my Twitter feed at Willtown Tech, you could probably find it there. But what are your thoughts?
I think the interesting part of this is that they will be using Intel 18A. So that's a detail that they did give us, which
Right.
this is like an advanced Intel process node that they are going to enable Ericsson to be using. I believe this is a 2025 timeframe. So
It is, yeah.
even next year, this is probably the following year.
Yeah.
If Intel Foundry Services is able to deliver this on time. And if they do, this will offer, Ericsson a pretty good advantage on power and performance in a way that maybe they never had before. So
Yeah.
this could be a game changer for Ericsson in terms of delivering new applications and new form factors for their customers.
I've spent a lot of time with Ericsson, and they had an Imagine Possible series of events last year. And their president of North America, Nicholas, was talking about how they really want to supercharge the developer community, make their infrastructure programmable and easier to develop on and really accelerate innovation. And this could be a part of that. It's also worth noting that I don't believe Ericsson has done a lot of custom silicon in the past, relative to, say, Nokia, that has their ReefShark set of SoCs. And Nokia, they did bet big on FPGA, and it didn't work out well for them, so they had to sort of retool what they were doing from a silicon perspective. But I think this is a smart move on Ericsson's part, to partner with Intel. And hey, Intel's had its ups and downs, right? There's no denying that. But this seems to me to be a great match made in heaven, and I think we'll see some significant innovation come out of it. To your point, this is a 2025 sort of expected tape out. And so it's interesting that they would have announced something so far in advance, but I have a feeling that there'll be more information coming as they move towards that 2025 date. But let's move to your second topic. And our fearless leader, Patrick Moorhead, is in Korea for Samsung Unpacked. Unfortunately, you didn't, or fortunately, you didn't make the trip all the way to Seoul, but I think you want to weigh in on what you found compelling with Unpacked in Korea.
Yeah, so I obviously wasn't able to attend, but I was pre-briefed, and I already have an article which will be going up today, most likely.
Awesome.
I've been busy yesterday, so I wasn't able to publish it yesterday, but hopefully it'll go up today. I think the big takeaways are we've got new foldables. We got a new Z Flip 5, which is the flippable phone, the one that opens like this. This is not it. This is a competitor device, but it's the flippy, like a flip phone. And then you've got the Fold, which is the Fold 5. And then you also have the new Tab S9 series, which are they're Android tablets. Those are also new. And then there's also new watches. So they've got the new Watch 6 and the Watch 6 Classic. The quick takeaways are the Flip 5 and the Fold 5 have a new hinge, which allows it to close flush, no longer having a slight open when it's a slight gap when it's closed. And then the Flip also has a bigger outside cover screen now, but it is not as big as the one on the Razer Plus that I have. So it's maybe not class leading. That said, all of the phones and tablets have the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor from Qualcomm. So that might be a factor in how they're priced. The Flip 5 starts at $1,000 and the Fold 5 starts at $1,800. All of them have 5G, as you would expect. S Pen is still not built into the Fold. It's still part of a case, so it's kind of unwieldy in my opinion. The Watch 6 Classic finally brings back the rotating bezel everybody loved. I personally was sad to see it go on the Watch 5 Pro. I will be trading my Watch 5 Pro in for a Classic 6 with a 47 millimeter screen.
Whoa.
Gigantic. It's 400.
Is that bigger? Is that bigger than the Apple Ultra, Anshel?
I think it might be, depending on, because Ultra's not a circle, it's a rectangle. So
yeah, it's a tank watch.
I think you technically get more square footage out of the circle, pi r squared. But I am not opting for the cellular version anymore because I find that cellular watches are pointless. Because I carry my phone with me everywhere. And then the S5, the Tab S9 comes in a S9 11-inch, S9 plus 12 point something inch, and then a 14.6-inch Ultra. So there's 3 sizes, all same processors, hodgepodge of memory capacities and storage capacities. The tablets do come with a memory card slot that's up to 1 terabyte. I cover that all in the article if you want to get more details. But my takeaway, the Fold does not have much competition, especially in the US, and Samsung really hasn't done much to improve it, in my opinion, other than the hinge. And then the Flip has improved. They actually now start at default 256 gigs of storage, which I believe is a consequence of the Razr Plus having a standard 256 gig storage. So there's going to be a lot of competition there between the Razr and the Flip. They're both going to be $1,000, and they're both going to have very similar specs. The Razr Plus does have an 8 Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, so it's a slightly slower processor, kind of late last year as opposed to this year's model. But overall, Samsung is still leading in Android tablets, Android watches. The new watch will come with Wear OS 4. I believe they'll beat Google with the Pixel Watch, which I'm wearing right here. This has 3.5, so I think the Samsung will actually beat Google to releasing their own operating system again. And then yeah, that's kind of the wrap up. I think the Watch 6 starts in like $300. If you want the Watch 6 Classic, I think it's like $400 is the starting price, and then the cellular is a little bit extra. But I think it's a very like iterative year for Samsung on foldables. But they do have a lot more competition globally on foldables, and then in the US they have more competition as well, at least on the Flip side.
Yeah, good summary, my friend. And as we mentioned, Patrick Moorhead, our chief analyst, is in Korea, and I'm sure he will be publishing some of his insights.
He already has.
Oh, he already has. Well, good for Pat. It's I'm sure he's struggling with the time zone over there. It's crazy. It's been a while since I've been to that part of the world, but good. So go hit the More Insights and Strategy Twitter handle, Patrick Moorhead as well, and you'll be able to find his article. But let's move to my third and final topic this week. I want to talk about Reliance in India, and they're hitting their 5G rollout ahead of their published schedule. So this is an article that broke in RCR Wireless News earlier this week, and it had set a rollout of December 2023 to be completed, but they're a few months early. And so what's reported is over 115,000 sites with more than 690,000 5G cells across India have been deployed as of to date, and Reliance is stating that that is enabling the company to provide 5G coverage in over 90% of India's towns and cities. And that's pretty amazing when you consider there's some pretty remote parts of that country as well. So we've talked about Reliance as a disruptor. They're leaning very heavily into disaggregated infrastructure, Open RAN, these sorts of things to speed deployment, lower CapEx and OpEx. And certainly that's important in that market because there's price sensitivity just based on the economics of India. But India continues to be a powerhouse economically. I think they're one of the better performing economies as we begin to exit these inflationary times. But does any of that surprise you, Anshel?
No, not really. I think India is really trying to, with obviously Jio being the leader there, expand access, improve speeds, and I really believe that Jio is kind of taken it upon themselves to be the leader for 5G deployment in India, because I think they realize that if they can really push the envelope of access, performance, and capabilities, every company in the world is going to want to come to Geo to deploy their 5G applications on Geo's network.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just going to be a position that others will not be able to compete with, and they will become, one of the top 5, if they aren't already top 5 operators in the world.
It's interesting insight, and certainly from my perspective, they as an operator are delivering tremendous value when you sort of look at price, performance, and capability and that sort of thing, and a lot of that is just their time to market. And I agree with you. I mean, given the population of India and given how disruptive they have demonstrated themselves, with not only their LTE deployment but now with their 5G deployment. I'd have to agree with you. They could become one of the largest, mobile network operators on the planet, in short order. But with that, let's move to your third and final topic. You want to talk about the FCC, and this is a subject that that I've scrutinized in the past, but where they have set kind of minimum broadband speeds, and from my perspective, they've been quite low. And so now you want to share some news, some very late breaking news on what they want to do to sort of reset that bar.
Yeah, so this is something that came out a couple days ago, actually, but has filtered through, the ether of press and journalism and stuff like that. And, obviously I'm not following the FCC, every single FCC statement. So this is something that kind of came over the last couple days, but FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel kind of shared with her colleagues an updated notice of inquiry, which is required by the Section 706 of the Telecommunications Act. And she has proposed that the commission consider several crucial characteristics of broadband deployment, including affordability, adoption, availability, and equitable access when determining whether broadband is being deployed in a reasonable and timely fashion to, quote, all Americans. And this is a statement from her press media relations people, media contact. It says that in today's, I'm just quoting her, in today's world, needs to have access affordable high-speed internet, no exceptions. It's time to connect everyone everywhere. Anything short of that is just 100. Anything short of 100% is just not good enough. So her goal is to increase the national fixed broadband standard to 100 megabits per second for download and 20 megabits per second for upload, and is discussing a range of evidence supporting the standard, including requirements for new networks funded by bipartisan infrastructure law. And then she also said that the FCC previously set the standard at 25 megabits down and 3 up in 2015 and has not updated it since, which is actually fair. 8 years is quite a long time to not update that.
Right.
How much more, when we look at like the Ericsson reports for internet connectivity, it's like doubling every 2 or 3 years. So I think she's very right in that sense. And I think this might be an indictment of the Ajit Pai era of not doing anything to change that. But, increasing it to 100 megabits down and 30 up, I think is fairly reasonable. I think that should be the minimum nowadays. And then she's also talking about how she wants to set a goal, a national goal of having 1 gig down and 500 up for the future.
Well, that'll be quite a lift, but yeah, I mean, I think resetting the minimum standard after 8 years is definitely the right thing to do, because I know in my own experience, using T-Mobile's FWA service and Bastrop, anything short of 100 down and 50 up is just it's not usable, it's not functional. So yeah, I mean, I think this is all positive. I mean, it's one thing to sort of set a policy in place. I mean, certainly it seems like the Biden administration is very focused on closing the digital divide. When you look at all the money that's being earmarked for telecommunications and infrastructure improvement and for tribal nations and that sort of thing, they're certainly trying to hang their hat on that, and it's the right thing to do. I mean, digital divide is real, and we need to close the gap because it can drive inclusion, economic prosperity, and a host of other, positive things for society. So it's, the internet, and having connectivity to the internet is almost becoming as important as the air that we breathe, and the water that we drink, and the food that we eat. So I think it's all a good thing. But with that, my friend, it's been another great podcast. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights for a future topic, for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Whaletown Tech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week. And don't forget to rate and subscribe.